What is going on, everybody? And in this video, we are talking about Bitcoin. Yes, there is a lot of earnings going on. And as I've stated before, earnings are something that are quite interesting because of the fact that expectations are already low. So if you miss them, about 82% of them don't miss it. So if you do miss it, that's pretty much your own fault. But with that being said, today is not about that. Today we are talking about Bitcoin. And the reason being is because there's this thing going around about a spot ETF that is supposed to get approved within roughly around the next 3 to 6 months. Now, we do have Bitcoin having roughly around April of next year. So we are trying to get essentially to that point and hopefully get approval before that happens. Now, ultimately, looking into this, just about 2 weeks ago, there was also an approval that came out, essentially saying that a Bitcoin spot ETF was approved. But shortly after, just hours after that statement was retracted, and then ultimately Bitcoin pulled right back down to roughly around that 26K mark. And that's essentially where we've been sitting over the past little while, about 2 weeks or so. And then over this past weekend, as you can see, going into this weekend, we started getting more news from BlackRock, ultimately saying that they listed a spot ETF amongst all their ETFs. So as you can see right here, we have this spot ETF that was essentially listed for Bitcoin for BlackRock. Now that has since caused Bitcoin to skyrocket to 35K. Ultimately, again, another article, or essentially another article came out, or I shouldn't say an article. They quickly redacted that as well. And now you can see that today it is no longer listed on there. And so they completely removed Bitcoin spot ETF, which is quite funny because shortly after today, we also got this. Now they are getting the SEC is essentially filed charges, disclosure investments by publicly traded fund and advised. So order files from 2015 to 2019 essentially goes on that they didn't disclose essentially the proper holdings. And so with that being said, again, the SEC has tons of dirt on this particular situation. And when you talk about Bitcoin, you have to look at essentially other resources that we've had, right? Like your gold and your silver, essentially other commodities, right? That we've essentially had over throughout the years. And when you talk about gold and silver have been one of the most heavily manipulated markets. And I think when you start talking about Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin, people talk and relate Bitcoin to the new gold. And I think when you're talking about Bitcoin, I think it's going to be that same standard when it comes to cryptocurrencies, that Bitcoin will be essentially the gold that represents all cryptocurrency, which everything is based off of. And so, being said, this is, I think, why we've had so many delays with the SEC. And ultimately, I think, with that being said, um, this is why there's so many delays in the spot ETF. I'm sure that BlackRock has already gotten approval, but somebody again listed it. I think the thing is I want to take a look at the current charts as of right now. So one thing you want to look at here. So we're continuing to push up, even though they removed the spot ETF. The Bitcoin is still up. What we ultimately want this thing to do is stay above 35K. If it can't do that, that's going to be a problem, in my opinion. And I'm here to show you why, because I've talked about this many times before. Actually, let me take the studies off of here. I've talked about this many times before, and I've pointed it out in SPX many times. Around this time last year, the SPX, we had that big report from Powell. I don't remember if it was if it was interest rate decision or if it was just Powell in general. I think it was an interest rate decision. And then from that point, the market just like essentially cratered down to like 3,500. And then from that, the next day, it dropped like 80 points out the gate. And then it was bought up about essentially like 120 points. And the market's been up ever since. And this is what you call about market manipulation. And I think we could be getting very much into that. You have to understand um, that I could be wrong here. Ultimately, again, this is just my opinion on this, but I'm looking at this purely for what Bitcoin could be, and ultimately understand that I think with institutions, Bitcoin spot ETF won't get official approval until institutions can buy more, essentially before retail investors is what they're trying to do. This is why they keep saying that, or claiming that Bitcoin is, money laundering and all kinds of other uh, badly associations, right? And talk about that's why essentially that Russia has been able to, money launder and to do a lot of illegal payments and stuff that has been used through cryptocurrency. And that's essentially how it was essentially thought for many, many years. But people are starting to actually see the benefit and what it can do when it comes to the technology. And now being said, you're looking at what it is in the mass adoption that people are going into it from that side of the house. And then you have to think that institutions want in first before there's any approval. And so at this point, essentially this 30K mark has been a ceiling until we got that leak. And now you're starting to get additional news coming out to try to take this back down, I think below 30K. The problem is that Bitcoin has been strongly resilient because people are uncertain about what's going to happen with what's currently going on with the market and the currency and the dollar and what's going on with BRICS. Again, BRICS and many other countries have tried to steer away from the dollar and get off the dollar standard, and we've gone to war with them. And so now I think Bitcoin is solidifying itself as essentially a world currency. And to be able to do that, I think institutions want the best bang for their buck, the lowest price they can get. And in doing so, they try to drive it down. But again, they've had a hard time trying to hold this thing down enough to where institutions can buy enough. Because you have to understand, once a spot ETF gets approved, you have 150 billion and 200 billion of capital into investment projects. They're going to be injected in. Once that becomes official, that amount of money is going to be injected into Bitcoin because they have to hold so much on their books. And so being said, that is going to drive the price of Bitcoin up to these ridiculous numbers that, Kathy Woods has been saying 500K. You've heard 250K, 150K. I think that's very much possible once you get the spot Bitcoin ETF approved. But again, it has to be approved first. And right now, with these leaks, I'm going to go back to the technicals at this aspect, at this point of what I'm getting to here. And so, because of the fact that it hasn't held down for long, I think institutions would like it roughly anywhere between this 25 and 15K mark. If they can get it lower, it would even be better. And if you watch my channel at all, you realize that I've always talked about this move. I just talked about the SPX move that happened this time last year, that this could be a liquidation spike over I think it was about $306 million got liquidated from a short position. Liquidated. This is exactly what happened last year. They liquidated, that way institutions could fill before the opposite move happens, right? Right after that event with Powell, we liquidated about 80 points on the index. And then from that point, you had a massive candle of institutions buying that pushed it over essentially the opening price, which was already down 80 points, back over 100 points from open, or about another additional 20 points over open price. And then it just took off ever since. And I think what is happening is now you're starting to see news articles drop because of this liquidation. Normally, when you stop everybody out, the house doesn't want you to make money on what's about ready to happen. And so you see liquidation spikes for the next move down. This is why it is extremely critical on what happens with Bitcoin from this point. If Bitcoin cannot hold above 35, the 35K mark, that is going to be a big, big problem. Now, I've talked about this before. You do have resistance here. You have a little resistance a little bit higher up. So it could even almost hit tag 40K and come back down, right? Because we haven't really officially like retested this level. We've been waiting forever to get up to this level to retest. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we get rejected and start selling off. We just saw that yesterday BlackRock listed the spot ETF. Today, they've essentially redacted that. And now you got essentially a lawsuit against BlackRock for not disclosing holdings. And so I think it's going to get more. If Bitcoin doesn't come down, I think we're going to get more bad news. And I think the wild card here is understanding Binance and where Binance sits. I think the SEC is holding on to Binance. This is another big exchange. I believe it's actually the biggest exchange for the world. That if that goes down, that's another off ramp they can take down and can draw more fear back into crypto to liquidate these markets down to where institutions can buy. Again, now this is just theory, but a lot of times, and you can say it's it's a conspiracy theory, whatever you want to say, but ultimately you have to understand, if you're in the markets long enough, I don't care if you're in crypto or you are essentially in equities, right? I trade both crypto and equities, and I can tell you that I've seen this move multiple times, essentially in that of the equity side of the market. And it happens all the time, and it happens in crypto too. You have to understand these markets are correlated. It doesn't matter, because essentially the system that we are in, right, they manipulate everything. And especially when it comes, if this is going to be the new gold standard, they have to have their hands in it. And if they can't have their hands in it, they will disclose information to drop the market, to draw the fear in, to drop the market to where they can buy enough before they get approval. And if we only have 3 to 6 months, essentially before the next halving, you want to try to liquidate as much as possible and sell off as much as you can, which the current move looks like it's a liquidation spike to potentially draw us to new lows from last year. So draw us potentially past the 16K mark. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's a strong possibility. Things are lining up that way. Now, I don't like to go off of technicals too much, especially in this market, because in this market, this is why you have to understand, this is why I use supply and demand, because supply and demand can show you targets. You want to know targets. You don't want to go off of candlestick patterns. Candlestick patterns are, there's only about a 30% hit rate on them now, right? Like, all algorithms have all been trained essentially on essentially patterns. So this is why supply and demand is big, because you can watch these. And when you're looking at these consolidation points, right, when we essentially bang between the 25K and 30K, this is a liquidation spike, right? Like, you're consolidating here. You finally get a liquidation spike. If this thing settles back below 30K, the odds are we are potentially heading for 10K. We're heading for a lower low. So anything lower than that 15K mark, I think it actually tagged at just under 15K at one point, very briefly, and then started pushing back up. So again, I think this is the potential move that can happen. Now, again, like I've stated, it can still go up. It could potentially go up to even this level here. Because if you want to draw another supply zone, you can draw another supply zone roughly around here. So you have this whole supply zone here, which you could liquidate. And so if they aren't liquidated enough, if they've already made 300 million off of this liquidation spike, they can push it up a little bit more and tag some more people out, and then just drop it and potentially bring this thing even lower, right? Like I said. And so Again, you get into this support here. There's a support around that 10K mark. I don't know if we're going to get that low. We're going to see really low. It again, it all depends on the market. And when I'm talking about the market hasn't priced in a recession yet. You have to understand that. And another big concern is if demand doesn't stop, again, we can get into this whole thing where we get into hyperinflation. What's happening with Venezuela, and their markets have gone up like 600% in a year. Like it's absolutely absurd because they just keep printing and printing and printing more money, and that absolutely just destroys the separation between that 1% in middle class and the lower class. And so we have to make sure that whatever does happen occurs when um, that we hold these high interest rates for a prolonged period of time, at least for the next couple months. So we're not really sure what could potentially happen with Bitcoin. Maybe the halving will push us up. I don't know. But ultimately, right now, we want demand to die. And I think that's still very strongly correlated with Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin's going to break away just yet. But again, you have to also understand that you have billions of dollars coming into this market. The market hasn't seen the amount of money that's about ready to come into this market for Bitcoin. The demand is going to be absolutely absurd. And you can look at even the gold ETFs when gold ETFs first came on deck. And you have to understand what is about ready to happen when we've seen these spikes, when we've gotten this news. And so I just wanted to jump on here. I wanted to come on and kind of give my point of view on what's potentially happening. Now, maybe it does break out. If it can hold roughly over that, 35K is one thing. We really need to get a monthly candle up over 35. Then that's a different story. But we really want this thing to hold above that and then start pushing up. Again, you have multiple levels here. I don't want to draw all those out right now. But I just want to bring this to your attention. That could be what's potentially happening is a liquidation spike. So you don't want, again, this thing to roll over. If we start getting more and more bad news, which obviously that news that just came out about BlackRock not disclosing, and they got, I think it was like a $2 million fee to have to pay because of the fact that they didn't disclose something. They don't really care. BlackRock is, one of the biggest corporations in the world, if not the biggest corporation, I believe. And so even with that being said, I mean, this doesn't matter, right? Like they'll take that lick if they can liquidate this and draw this back down. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's more bad news that comes out to try to draw this back potentially around that 25, if not lower, so that institutions can keep on buying. So again, this is just my opinion. It could not be that, but I try to deal in probabilities and what's the best educated guess here. And ultimately, with the way things have been rolling out, I just wanted to come on. I know this is a major event going on with crypto because crypto has had these huge pumps, and the rest of the market just been kind of going sideways, waiting for these earnings to unfold. So again, just my opinion, giving my 2 cents on what I potentially think could be playing out here. We'll see over the next couple of days. Definitely go over this on the weekly updates. If there's any other events that occur, I'll definitely jump on here and create another video for you guys. So with that being said, if you did enjoy this video, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think it's just a liquidation spike? Do you think that we're actually going to go back lower, or do you think this is actually breakout? You think crypto is going to pull us out of this hole, this bear market? And let me know before before the halving happens, right? Is this going to be the breakaway that we need? So with all that being said, have a great day, and I'll see you guys later.